I just played 6 consecutive clips of Democrats indicating that fencing works, walls work, barriers work, and some of it is legitimate. This feels like the dam is about to break in some ways. Am I wrong? Am I getting my hopes up too high?
Well, I always do hold my breath in these matters. Having covered immigration policy and politics for more than a quarter century, one truism about the Beltway is that, unfortunately, the establishments of both parties do not want to prioritize immigration enforcement at the borders, at the ports of entry, at the consular offices. And every time that we've had a wake-up call that puts those blaring lights on the failures of systemic immigration enforcement, we get this temporary bipartisan agreement that it should be something that the government does as a basic duty, and then they hit the snooze button again. And that's because all of the financial and ideological incentives entice these establishment politicians to do nothing. That's the default.
Yes, the default is obviously going to be to do nothing, and both of them both sides think they can dig in and think they each have the upper hand. The president, because really he's no other choice if he doesn't start getting the wall now. I don't really see a political future long term, unfortunately. But the Democrats think he's got no leverage. Michelle, well, what do you think? Who's got more leverage here in this case?
I would think that it's the president that has more leverage in this case, and that is largely due to his singular focus on his fundamental campaign promise. And I think that he is surrounded by very practical people who understand that if he doesn't deliver on this, he doesn't have a political future. And I think that what's happening is that here's one thing I think that is really significant and that the White House deserves credit for. So a lot of the problem with the American people, when you see these polls over the last 25 years, and the smug open borders media can say, oh, well, look, the polls show that people don't care about immigration. It's only number 4 or 5 or 6 as a priority. And they could point to that because, of course, they, the media, were responsible for not fully reporting the national crisis that's gone on at the borders and every other port of entry for the last 25 years because they've whitewashed it, because the media's agenda is to keep people dumb, blind, and stupid to the problem. But having cut my teeth in L.A. and then later having moved to Seattle and been involved in a lot of stories about systemic immigration enforcement failures on both parts of the border, I've had to fight within my own newsrooms that I've worked for to make this a priority. And so when you have the White House that is willing to speak Ronil Singh's name, for example, and to put a human face on the toll, there have been breakthroughs. And, you're seeing that people, beyond the base, are finally concerned about this problem.
Yeah, well, and this is part of why I think this is such a huge issue, and I cite this a lot, but anecdotally, I got a house this year. It's a little older house, needs a lot of work done, and some of the working class guys are coming in. I ask them about the president. We talk about the president. They might see some of the memorabilia I might have around the house, and we talk about it, and a lot of them you can tell are sort of knee-jerk blue-collar Democrats, but they dig the president on immigration. They dig the idea that he's not going to allow for the importation of competition that's going to drive down their wages or maybe put them out of work altogether. And they dig that. And so if he loses sight of that, he's losing a coalition. Michelle, you and I are going to show up and vote for him even if nothing else goes well for the most part. He's going to do something to really screw up to lose this audience. But what put him over the top in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, it's these guys, and it's on this topic.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so this has been the third rail for Republican politicians because Of course, immigration is not just a national security and a public safety issue. It is a cultural issue. It's an economic security issue.
Yes.
And I have bookends for the two major books that I've written about immigration, Invasion and Sold Out, that illuminate, the flip sides of that coin. And so it's not just blue-collar American workers, of course, a lot of high-tech American workers who worked really hard and were the best in their industry and business in high tech, and then discover by the time that they're 40 or 45 and by no means over the hill that they're priced out of the market by a flood of cheap foreign inferior labor in an industry that so many American politicians say that there's a so-called worker shortage in. Completely, that's a manufactured crisis. It's when I talk about manufactured
Yes, that's
crisis.
right. That's right. Yeah, and I did get a kick out of the Democrats who have been lighting their hair on fire over every little thing for 2 years, suggesting this is the manufactured crisis. It's strange credulity, Michelle. The most hysterical group of people on the planet, it seemed to be the American left and the Democratic Party, announcing the people streaming over our border. We brought to our readers' attention another illegal immigrant stabbed a teenager, 3 illegal immigrant MS-13 members, and not 80 miles north of the border. We're talking on Long Island last night. We read about this stuff all the time. That's not a crisis. That's not a crisis. The big crisis here is that Jim Acosta lost his press pass for 12 hours.
Right, exactly, and I think the barbarity, especially the callousness of so much of the radical Democrat left, is really bearing its teeth, and I think that President Trump's willingness to push back against the old tired racism, xenophobia, ethnophobia card in the face of this, and really to show how disingenuous the open borders left is. I mean, here their hearts bleed for every last illegal immigrant family trying to get across the border, throwing rocks at our Border Patrol and burning our flags. And, the likes of Anna Navarro and Seth Meyers and every one of these California Democrats who've written letters and lobbied and protested about the human rights violations at the border have nothing to say about American victims of illegal alien crime and law-abiding immigrants, for that matter.
Yes, Michelle Malkin again is with me. Go to michellemalkin.com. She's also at Michelle Malkin on Twitter. One of the very few Twitters I recommend, but when you've got over 2 million followers and you tweet the stuff she tweets, hard not to recommend it. Michelle, a ton more to talk about with you today, but I want to note that something you kind of hinted at. I don't know if you caught the president's tweet this morning about a path to citizenship for H-1B people, which is, I guess technically is not amnesty from a broken law, but it is a implication that he's looking to keep foreigners here, and he's putting that as a high priority on his list. And I'm hoping we're going to prove that this is some sort of level of 4D chess. But if you heard my second hour, I was very triggered by the tweet. I have no clue why we're talking about H-1B folks getting a pathway to citizenship while our border is gaping just as much as it was 2 years ago. It freaked me out a bit. Did you see it? Do you have any thoughts on it, or just the general concept?
Yeah, I have the same kind of panic you do, and my default is not to think this is some sort of master strategy. I don't get it. I don't get it. And I know that there are so many American tech workers who put their reputations on the line to support this president because he said he understood that. I mean,
that's right.
It seems like there's amnesia. Everybody was talking about the poor Disney workers, 5 years ago, and now they're personas non grata. So this is incredibly disturbing. I also think this is not really President Trump speaking. It must be Jared Ivanka. And I hope that the folks that side with us somehow were able to prevail on this. But it seems to have come out of, literally left field.
Yeah, literally, that's the exact term that was used in our Breitbart internal channel. That one of our reporters said, "This seems like out of left field. Where is this coming from? Why is this being prioritized right this second?" Which has always been my issue with this administration. It's usually not their decision making; it is the order in which they prioritize things, which it bothers me the most. Which I feel like they've got so much reversed in terms of the who sets the priorities on the inside. I don't want to make this a bash Trump segment because there's more productive stuff we can do with our time. But I was freaked out by this tweet, and I'm saddened, but in a way heartened that you had the same reaction that I did. I was kind of hoping you talked me off the ledge, but at least I know that my radar, my compass must still be pointing due north on some of this stuff. Michelle Malkin has got what Dennis Prager would call the rarest of good traits, bravery. And Michelle, you're out there taking on some big guns. You were on Tucker yesterday talking about some of the tech giants. We call them the masters of the universe at Breitbart. We're thrilled that you're partners in arms with us on this fight. I've got another immigration question or two for you, but I'd be remiss if we didn't spend at least a few minutes on that topic. If we could ever kick this immigration issue, this is my next most important issue, with education being a close third on what's happening in our K through 12. But these tech giants are an existential threat to America as we know it. Give me your 30,000 foot on the topic.
Yes, as long as these Silicon Valley radical ideologues are using their platforms to control speech in America and are deplatforming so many of my friends and allies in the United States and across the world, I believe it's time for the right to call for President Trump to deplatform Silicon Valley from our public schools.
Wow.
They have no business infiltrating government schools with their propaganda, being brainwashed, feeding these kids, bombarding them with ads, addicting them to technology when that really should be crucial. The decision of parents. There are so many teachers out there who are whistleblowers now talking about the public safety dangers of so many of these tech devices, the lack of security, the lack of control, plain text passwords being collected, the student data mining racket that, of course, was facilitated by the Obama administration, undermining federal education and privacy rights protections, which allowed third-party contractors to plunder all of this PII, personally identifiable information of children. And you know what? Breitbart has been one of the few, if not only, on the right to continually highlight these problems and to give a platform and voice to grassroots education reformers. So again, I mean, this is just like the immigration issue, right? Because You've got this bipartisan alliance of establishment Republicans, i.e. Paul Ryan, who, I can't say good riddance because that guy is never going to get out of our hair and out of our business and out of our lives, right? And a lot of these Democrats who are supposedly progressive and anti-corporate, but, we wouldn't have had Common Core if it wasn't for the common alliance between these people who want to control the schools.
That's Michelle Malkin. Yeah, I think you nailed it, and this is why hopefully the president will get this border shut, and then you can come back and we can talk about education too, which was one of your one of the original grassroots crusaders on this issue, and it's one that we're going to have increased focus on it regardless. But this is why the president needs to solve some of these obvious problems quick, because there's so much on our plate, and it's a ticking clock. I mean, we got 2 years to go. But give me your the perspective on how the 2020 race is shaping up. It seems like, we had Beto Instagramming his teeth cleaning yesterday. Pocahontas seems to be the only person who's running in earnest. Kamala Harris. You mentioned California. Michelle, I'm a Los Angeles guy. They have the exact same problems as they had when I started paying attention to what was going on in my city when I was in elementary school. Exact same problems today, yet Mayor Garcetti thinks he's going to be president. Hasn't solved one of the issues: illegal immigration, unusable school system, traffic, horrible airport, homelessness. All this stuff is still exactly the same. These guys think they're going to be president. It's going to be super fun, but of course the stakes couldn't be higher. Where are we at in this regard?
Yeah, you essentially have this parade of social justice warrior panderers, and Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, I have to say I was a little surprised that Tom Steyer made his announcement that he wasn't going to run and
Yeah, same.
Prefers to steer the $40 million that I thought was going to go into his presidential campaign into impeachment efforts. But if he wants to pour that down the drain, fine, go ahead. I mean, I live in Colorado now, which has been Californicated for years, unfortunately.
Sure.
When I moved here 10 years ago with my family, it was it was red purple, but now there's a complete takeover. And I did a documentary on this several years ago called Rocky Mountain Heist, and I think that this heist is taking place, across the country. Now, how does that bode for this field of clowns for their presidential field? I don't know, but I guess I would say that the person I'm most concerned about is Michael Bloomberg. And
interesting. Why is that?
Well, because he's been laying the groundwork, and he's been toying with a presidential run now for the last two cycles.
Sure.
And I think that the people will see him as the most formidable opposition to President Trump because they think of him as sort of the anti-Bizarro Trump, and that certainly is true with regard to his open borders policies. I think it's personally, I think it's delusional. The idea that this guy thinks he might have anywhere near the working class appeal that President Trump did. But I wouldn't discount. I wouldn't discount him.
Michelle, I know our time's limited here, so last question to touch on something you mentioned earlier in the broadcast about how some of our political elite and the media in particular think that the rank and file vote are dumb. This is a very caller-driven show. You almost never get a dumb person on. They almost all have more nuance than anyone who gets paid to give opinions on CNN. And I say that not to flatter myself and my audience because it's true. I learn stuff the first time I heard about the Oval Office address was a caller suggested on this show long before anyone else, including my good friend Ann Coulter, who is the big champion of it, and others like me and like so many others were out there. But the first time I heard of the callers came up with it. And so this is the theme. When you see Jim Acosta go down to the border and say that it's calm down here, and he's out there, he's got security with him, he's got guards with him, and he goes to the part with a wall and declares it's calm, there's no crisis. How dumb do these people think we are? And do you think that continues to backfire heading in towards 2020?
Well, I really think that Jim Acosta's selfie video at the border ranks right up there among the biggest moments of media self-ownage. So even people on the left side of the aisle could see it. And, I think the effectiveness of grassroots conservatives and limited government and independent people on Twitter and Facebook is why we're seeing this concerted effort to deplatform so many effective, non-traditional voices. And, the more that man speaks and the more that we see his face, it is the best argument out there for voting for Trump in 2020. And then I have to say, in the 25-plus years that I've worked in journalism, these are consequential times, but it also is a really fun time to be a conservative journalist.
That's right.
Because to wake up and see Trump put Dear Diary and then have a constant tweet, I don't think I've laughed so much in covering politics as I have the last 2 years.
Yes,
even though, I've wept
and Michelle, a shameless plug for Breitbart's Twitter. Our own Ezra Doulis, who's my right-hand man on the front page at Breitbart News, made the exact same joke hours before. So we're on the exact same page as whoever's controlling the president's Twitter. I think it's Dan Scavino.
Great minds. Think alike.
Yeah, great minds. Love that.
Tweet alike.
Michelle, I wish we had more time because I would ask you about Ocasio-Cortez, who I think is another perfect example of, yes, high stakes, but super fun also, that we get to wake up to whatever is her latest rant that she's on. So I do think we should stop and enjoy ourselves every so often. And if we can only shut the border, then I might actually take my own advice, Michelle.
Amen. Amen to that. It's great catching up with you.
Great catch up with you, MichelleMalkin.com, one of the warriors out there who is also super smart lady, as you can tell. Have you back soon. Thanks a lot.